Okay, so also you all are the special ones. I record this class for two other sections, so you're particularly special. You know what they say, you're special just like everyone else. Okay, so we're just going to talk through some slides. This isn't going to take so long. I've seen, so like presenting is part of my job. It's also a hobby of mine in some ways. I have a lot of feelings about how to put together good slides. And this is my sort of compilation of some best practices that I follow personally and that I've learned from various fields how to present, especially with data. There is research behind a lot of this, that these approaches are particularly effective for absorbing ideas. And I've used them throughout the semester. So I use these principles as I construct slides for this class. So the first one is relatively simple. Keep it simple. You really just want one idea per slide. It's going to be hard when you're putting your final project together to present your project in 2 slides, which basically means 2 big ideas. And we're going to talk about some ways that students in the past have done this. I'm going to show you some examples of high quality work. But the main idea is when you have a slide, you want one idea. You want a big title. So my idea on this slide is to keep it simple. I have my big claim, the thing I want you to remember. It's big, it's in bold, it's at the top. And then I have a bit of supporting information right below. And I've graded out to make it sort of less obvious so it doesn't detract from the main point. It contributes by giving you more specifics, but I have one idea, big idea, and then supporting evidence or supporting information. And then the rest of it is a visual. Particularly in this class, you're going to be able to use visuals in your presentation. We've spent tons of time this semester talking about visuals. And when we're talking about data, we just have lots of good ways of presenting data visually. So here I have one idea. It's a distribution of coffee consumption per capita across a bunch of states, or across a bunch of countries in 1999. I think this is a highly effective slide. In fact, I use this format very frequently. Like this is one of the main formats I use. Big title, subtitle which supports, and then some information that can be displayed visually. There's so much evidence that this structure is the easiest way to get ideas into other people's brains. It just works. You're going to feel tempted to make things more complicated. Resist it. Make it simple. Keep it simple. When you're presenting data in support of your one idea, you want to use visual clues to highlight the point that you're trying to convey. So here, we have the one idea per slide. I want to get rid of lots of extra details. So in this figure, there's not really enough information in this figure to communicate what's going on. And that's because I'm saying something different than what I'm trying to communicate in the figure. This figure, if you remember, I used this in class. In I think it was part 2. We were talking about time series. I used this figure to communicate how the median has changed over different years. Everything is gray except for the main point that I'm trying to convey, which is the median. You can nitpick this. Like, if I were to make this again, I would make the median bigger and bolder and maybe more red. Everything else is gray, except for the one point. I've removed all of the extraneous details and used color to highlight one point. And you'll notice I've used this all semester. So, yeah, highlight the main ideas, remove all the other stuff. And then we have lots of things that we can do with visuals, lots of different ways of modifying them. And we could spend like weeks on this if we wanted to. We have color. So here I've highlighted April as the highest coffee price. It's the price with the highest, the month with the highest price. And so I've highlighted that in blue. So we can use colors as visual indicators of something important. Everything else is grayed out. And then I've also used annotations. So sometimes it's better to have a little bit more description of what's going on. So here, if I had just highlighted April, you may not really fully understand what I'm trying to communicate. So I've added a chart annotation, which you can actually just do this directly in PowerPoint. So you can, this is just, I mean, you can move this around and change what it says. This is also just an arrow that you can create in PowerPoint. So, annotations and arrows. You see in like all the YouTube thumbnails, they all have like arrows. We just love looking at arrows. People on YouTube have figured this out. It's like we love just like something really clear. In fact, like YouTube thumbnails follow these practices. You may not realize it, but like a lot of them do. The really effective people on YouTube are creating really nice thumbnails using a lot of these practices. You could make this better. How many of you like this figure? How many of you like this slide, I mean? And how many of you don't? No one's willing to tell me they don't like it. I'm going to take that as you all love it. That's my interpretation. You could make this better. You could bold April. That might make it a little bit easier to read. But in general, this is a very effective structure for a slide. And there are lots of other kinds of things you can do here. But this is just an example. Also, you want to maintain consistency of the text, the colors, the font size, and the font style. In general, I recommend using one font. So you want the font to be consistent, not just in the slide, but also across slides. My default is to use Times New Roman. That's what I use in really all of my slides. This is sort of meta. It's like I'm using chart annotations to tell you that I'm using Times New Roman in all of these places. So it's sort of this meta slide. I have consistent font styling, which makes this look professional. And the way I've done this, I have Times New Roman in PowerPoint. So you can pick a bunch of different font styles. And I've used it for each of the different parts, including the chart annotation here. But then the figure itself is created in matplotlib, or in Python. So I had to go in and manually change it to Times New Roman in Python. So I had to like synchronize across Python and PowerPoint. The default in Python is Arial. So if you don't want to change the default in Python, you can change the font in PowerPoint. So you could pick Arial here if you wanted to match it. But I recommend maintaining consistency with your fonts and your styles. Okay, how many of you like this figure? How many of you like this slide, I mean? Okay, fewer. Oh my gosh, how many of you dislike it? Tell me why. This is one of my favorites. Why don't you like it?
It would be nice if like one arrow came in at a time. I think the arrows traveling.
Oh, so it's like, yeah, so we could sort of click through and like fade one in and fade one out. Yeah, so you can be fancy about those things. Maybe I'll add that to the next time I present this. What else? How could we improve this? Yeah.
I feel like the graph could be kind of weird.
So yeah, we could move it into the center. Yeah, maybe I'll move that next time. Okay. Yeah, what else? Good suggestion. Love it. What else? All right, so consistency. You also are going to be presenting to an audience that doesn't understand all the details of what you're doing. You've spent a lot of time working through the details. I just gave a presentation today. I presented this other thing. And I hadn't presented this before. There were a lot of details that I was very familiar with that none of my audience was fully aware of. And so they got sort of confused just by the context. It's not like a hard idea to understand. It was just I didn't fully lay out the context for them. What you're aiming to do, it's a difficult thing to do, but what you're aiming to do is give appropriate context for your project. So the background detail. So for example, in this figure, I've used descriptive titles, I've used axis labels, and then units. So I have a title here at the beginning, or at the top. So I'm telling you what we're looking at. I'm also including the axes. So I have consumption per capita in one year, and then consumption per capita in the other. And you'll remember this figure, right? Like we talked about changes in consumption per capita across time. So this is like a way of visualizing changes in time. And this figure would be impossible to interpret if I didn't have appropriate context. You would not know what you're looking at. So providing the context that's appropriate for your audience to understand what you're trying to communicate. That's a pretty big deal. It doesn't really impact the sort of visual style of your presentation, but it impacts how easy it is to understand. You may have noticed also that I don't always get this right. There have been a couple of times where you've mentioned that you didn't understand the figure. And in a lot of cases, I hadn't correctly labeled the axes. So spend some time thinking about these things. Make sure that maybe show the figure to someone who isn't familiar with, like your roommate or whoever, someone who isn't familiar with what you're working on, and see if they can understand it. And then sort of a larger point here is to be audience-centric. Don't use acronyms that often. Like sometimes acronyms are helpful, but try to stay away from them. Most people won't understand an acronym. You hear it, you may get it in the moment, but then you'll forget it pretty quickly, like what it stands for. And then adjust the level of detail you're working with to your audience. You remember this figure. In context, you knew what Q1 was. We had just talked about different quartiles. So I had defined Q1. If I gave you this slide without more background information, you wouldn't know what Q1 was. I know what Q1 is, but if I was presenting this to you without, your background knowledge of quartiles, Q1 would not be clear what I was talking about. So make sure when you use things like this that it's very clear. We had just talked about quartiles. We just talked about box plots like this. So I knew that you knew it, which is why I wrote it like this. When you're constructing slides and figures, make sure everything is clear to an audience without a lot of background information. Do you know how long I took to make this figure? I think it probably took me half an hour. It might have been 20 minutes. It was a long time. I made a lot of decisions constructing this figure. I selected, the 5 different countries here, and I labeled them. I made decisions about the margins, like how far away the axis label should be from the vertical line. I decided what the color and size of the selected country's dots should be. So I made it red to highlight it. And then I also changed the color and the grayness of the other countries that aren't highlighted. I made a lot of decisions. You as an audience don't care. You don't care at all. Like when you're looking at this figure, all you care about is the figure. You don't care about all the little decisions I made behind the scenes, that I chose these countries and not other ones. Lots of decisions went into this, and I'm not telling you any of it because you just don't care. You want to think about what your audience cares about and then give them that. You're putting together excellent projects. You're going to spend a lot of time making data transformations. You're going to like run through a couple of different statistical models that are, that you'll throw out. You're going to like collect data from different sources and then like run a bunch of different things. You'll like, combine data sets in particular ways and then combine them in different ways, etc. Lots of decisions are going to happen along the way to a nice presentation. Don't talk about any of it. Your audience doesn't care. What they do care about is your result. You want to get the audience as quickly as possible to the conclusion. Drop all the extraneous details. Think about what your audience wants to hear, and then give that to them. Okay. Resist that urge. Resist the urge to explain all of the steps you went through. You will feel it. I promise you. I promise you, you will want to talk through all of the nuances of your project. Don't do it. Just show the results. How many of you liked this slide? Okay, they're getting worse, I guess. How many of you don't like it? Okay, it's like 1-to-1, so everyone's abstaining. All right, I see you. Okay, so maybe second to last one here. When you're putting together a slide, you want to minimize the cognitive load of your audience. As I'm talking to you, you also have a figure, you have a title, you have bullet points, and you're trying to make sense of what the figure is telling you about the bullet points as I'm saying words to you. So you have like words coming in your ear, words coming in your eye, and a figure. This is a lot of things going on. You're smart people, you know how to do it, but even if you're really good at this, it's still extra work. What you want to do is make the job of the audience as easy as possible by making it sort of progressively easier for your audience to understand. Like hold their hand, pull them through, make it as easy as possible for them to not have to do work. So here I have, 2 bullet points. I have a bunch of white space. 2 bullet points I would say is probably enough. Maybe following Corin's recommendation, we could, have these incrementally get faded on the screen if you want. We could also, I think someone in an earlier class recommended that I center this. Probably better. Lots of things we could do here. How many of you like this figure? Okay, that's better. Maybe this is a better figure. How many of you don't? How many of you think I could add more text to this and still get away with it? How many of you think this is about as much text as we should have? I agree with you. I don't like reading a lot more than this on a slide. I think slides are in general not intended to be like a paper on a screen. It's doing a different job. You're not trying to put as much on a screen as possible. You want to keep it simple. And part of that means minimizing the cognitive load of your audience. Okay, last point here. Most of you are not experienced at presenting, and that's okay. No one is born with the skill of effective public communication. It's not a skill that comes naturally, basically, to anyone. Some people practice it as children. Some people practice it in high school. Some people practice it in college. It requires doing the reps. You have to get practice doing it. The fact that you're not good at it is not a knock against you. It's just you have to put in more work. So rehearse it. Get your group mate or group mates and practice. Grab your roommate. It's going to be awkward. Present it to your roommate. You're going to present it to this class. It's sort of harder to present it to a roommate than it is to a classroom in some weird way. So practice that. Rehearse it. Make sure the slides follow a progression, and do it a couple of times. You want about 2 minutes per group. So we have 2 hours, and we have 40 people. So to make that happen, we have to keep it under 3 minutes per person, roughly. We can have a little bit of wiggle room there, but keep it about 2 minutes per group. And then I'll have a timer, so you know when to stop. And then in general, I've already spent about a minute on this slide. Aim for about a minute per slide, which gives you about 2 slides. If I see more than 2 slides, I'm going to be a little concerned. 1 minute per slide is very fast. When you're setting up your presentation, this is maybe a little bit obvious, but plan your order. Know what you're going to say in what sequence. You want to start with the descriptives. What's your question? What's your data? What does it look like? And then that's on one slide. The second slide is your test. So make a nice figure, show me the model if it's complicated, and then in one sentence, tell me what the model tells us in English. It's a very effective approach. If I just put a slide on the screen, it's often difficult to understand simply by throwing up something on a projector. What you want to do is talk your audience through step by step what they're seeing. It may look obvious to you what's on the screen, but you want to just say it in words. You may notice I do this when I present figures. I tell you what's on each axis, how to interpret it, which makes your job as an audience much easier. You want to walk verbally your audience through step by step how you're thinking about what you're seeing. Just say it. Pretend you're. I sometimes think of Jeff Probst. He'll you'll watch Survivor. I think I asked you this maybe once before, and it's only Corin. Yeah. Survivor is a great show. Jeff Probst narrates it's they play games, and he'll just be constantly talking about what he's seeing, which is really nice for an audience. Do the same thing when you're presenting. Just say what you're thinking about what you're seeing, and your audience will appreciate that. An audience will not understand if you just put a slide up. You have to talk the audience through step by step. Yeah, Luke.
So for the slide that presents our figure and our results, so we'll have one sentence, the title, and then one sentence that describes the results, and then below that the linear model.
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll show you some examples of what this can look like. Yeah. And then throw out everything that's not relevant. Okay, nice. Any other questions here? So I was going to make an in-class live example using the project we've been working on with unemployment and voter turnout. But I think for the sake of time, I just want to show you some examples of past students' work. Maybe we'll be able to do it next class. But I just want to show you some excellent work. This is one of my favorite parts of my job, is seeing what people do. I'm pumped for finals week, seeing your stuff. So Olga is the undergrad TA for next semester. She was in my class in the fall, and she asked this question in her final project, which is frankly extraordinary. This is a question she could get data for, and a question that's well grounded in economic theory. I'm about to have a child, my first child, kind of crazy. Children are expensive. And recessions impact how much money you have. So by economic theory, we would expect the demand for children, a weird way of saying it, to go down when recessions hit. So what Olga did is, and her groupmate, they asked this question. And the way they approached this was using time series. So they had on one, so their second slide was 2 figures describing their 2 data sets. We can, so this is one of my favorite projects. This is excellent work. I'm going to say a bunch of things. I'm going to offer recommendations for how to make this better, but that doesn't detract from the quality of this work. I was very impressed with this. But I'm going to offer you some suggestions. You, as a class, have a higher bar than what my students did in the fall. We've covered more material. You have more skills. We've just done a lot more. So the bar is actually higher for you. So this is high quality work, but I'm going to give you some extra as you're putting your stuff together. So I'm going to offer some recommendations for how to make this better. But what they did here, they had descriptives for both of the 2 data series, which is exactly what I'm looking for on a first slide. So, I mean, you could combine, they had like a title slide, but you could put this on this slide. So you have the main question at the top, and then the 2 descriptive figures. So the way I would present this, I would say, look, I have my question, I want to know if fertility rates decline during and after recessions. And I'm going to use 2 time series. One is of fertility rates. So you'll see on the vertical axis, you hear me talking through all the different parts. On the vertical axis, I have the fertility rate. And then on the horizontal axis, I have the year. And you can see a decrease in the fertility rate over time. So did you hear me talk through all the different parts? You can't just put a figure up and expect an audience to know. You want to talk them through it. And then we have a second series, which is the change in GDP over time. So this is a first difference. We're looking at the change in GDP year over year. So I've even mentioned my data transformation. I've told you that I'm looking at the difference. Okay, nice. So this is like a great way to start. Very interesting question, solidly grounded in economic theory. We're not, this isn't like ice cream and drownings. We know exactly that there should be a relationship here. And then this second figure is amazing for a lot of reasons. First off, it's just a simple presentation of the relationship between the 2 main variables. So I have change in GDP on the horizontal axis, and then I have average fertility rate on the vertical axis in the year after. So I have the 2 variables, and then I have the data points, and then I plot my regression line. This is a simple model, so I can get away, and in fact, they got away with not writing the regression model down. And that's okay in their context. A lot of you are going to, in fact, I strongly encourage you to do something more. We've talked about doing something a little more sophisticated with the tools that we have. they didn't have interaction effects or like more complicated statistical models. So this was what I was looking for from them. And they didn't need to write down the regression model because you can just visualize it very clearly. In the gender wage gap example we used this semester, I think in that case too, you probably wouldn't need to write down the regression model because it's pretty clear what's going on. But if there are, like a lot of you are going to work with regression equations where it's not easy to visualize the entirety of the model. And in that case, I would recommend writing it down. What they did here was like S tier. They had a regression model, which they ran in the background. They don't have the regression output on the screen. Instead, what they have is one sentence across the top, which tells you in English what the regression equation means. I don't care what the beta 1 is. I care what it means. And they've effectively written this in one sentence, which is amazing. For every 1% increase in the GDP growth, we have a 3-point increase in the fertility rate. And then they give me a p-value. That's all you need to report this test. There's nothing fancy here. They've translated the beta into something that can be easily stated in English. I'm going to show you an example of a different way of doing this, which I think is, it was fine for my purposes. A great project, but it wasn't quite as clear. This is as good as it gets. Okay, and then you may have noticed some other things, like we didn't last semester talk about autocorrelation, so there's a bunch of stuff here. You'd have to mention like how to deal with these kinds of problems. Like this doesn't look like it satisfies all the assumptions of OLS, which is fine for me at the time, but I'm holding you to a higher standard. You have to sort of mention those things or address them. Okay, amazing, right? This is amazing. Okay, this is great work. You want to see another one? All right, so another student, again, asked an amazing question. So this is another question that was firmly grounded in economic theory, or at least like behavioral science. If you have children, it's harder for you to go to the polls. If I have a child at home, as a single parent, I'm not a single parent, but if I were, it would be harder to vote. Because I would either have to take my child to the polls, or I would have to hire someone to look after my child while I was voting. So it's harder for a single parent than a two-parent household to vote. So we would expect that voting would be lower, just based on this simple way of thinking about voting. We'd expect voting to be lower in areas with higher rates of single-parent households. And so what this student did is just look county by county. We had just had an election you may have heard of in the fall. So we had this like brand new data. So the student looked at 5 swing states and then looked at each of the counties and related single-parent households and voter turnout in the 2024 election, and found a negative relationship. So this was amazing to me. I think Olga's presentation of the results was maybe clearer. In fact, definitely clear. Here we have the regression equation with the estimated betas, and then a statement of what's going on. This is in one slide, which is pretty cool. I think one slide is better than 2, but it comes at the expense of not including like histograms of the distribution of the 2 main variables. So there's a trade-off. One slide is better than 2, but it's also nice to show the distribution of the data. So this was high quality work. I loved the question. I loved the use of data. The statistical model was appropriate. We could improve by maybe stating the conclusion more directly. So here, there's some relationship. You could be very specific about what you found. So I found that every 1% increase in single-parent households led to a 0.75% decrease in the turnout rate, or is associated with a 0.75% decrease in the turnout rate. Yeah, Luke.
Do you want us to include like the residual plots and all? Something like that?
Yeah, great question. So probably not in the presentation. If there's something weird going on in your residual plots, you should mention it. But there's probably not going to be enough space in a presentation for it. Yeah, what else? Okay, I love this project. This was a really good one. Do you want to see another? I'm going to keep going until I don't get enthusiastic yeses. This is another one. We had an election in the fall, and so a lot of students were working through voting projects. So in this one, this group, they were asking whether there was a relationship between income and voting preferences. They use a very distinct style. I'm going to ask your feelings about that in a second. It's not my preference. Some people like it. I prefer very clean, sort of unstyled presentations. So you're going to give me your preference about this in a second. But this was another amazing project. So we had household income by states. So this group actually constructed a map of states colored by their average income, and they did it actually in Excel. And then they also looked at the difference in vote share by state. So this is all 50 states, and then they just took the difference between the Republican vote share and the Democratic vote share. So if it's 0, then it's a tie. And then if it's positive, then it's more Republican. And if it's negative, then it's more Democrat. So DC was this last one. Okay, so this is some descriptives. It's a little bit hard to read the horizontal, and there's a lot of color, which I would maybe stay away from. But I loved this project. So this was their second slide. So they had, on the horizontal, they had household mean income. You see how I'm talking this through? It's very helpful as an audience to hear someone just say what's on screen. Horizontal is the household mean income, which is normalized. And then on the vertical axis, there was the vote share difference. And so what they did is just try to predict the vote difference using income. And what they found was every $1 million increase in income, which is a huge amount of income, so they found a pretty small effect, was associated with a roughly 1% increase in the Democratic vote share. And so their figure just plots out the regression equation. You may notice there's some risk of heteroscedasticity. You can see that very clearly in this figure. Last semester, we didn't address those kinds of problems, but you have the tools to address them, so I expect you to account for that in some way. Okay, how many of you like strong, bold styling like this? And how many of you don't? So we can be mixed on this. I personally don't. Like, if I was making these slides, I would use a simpler format. But if you like it, it's not 100% wrong. It's just not what I would recommend. Okay, do we want to do another one? Yes and a no, looks like. Maybe we'll leave it here. I have one more, but I think we'll leave it here. Sorry, Aiden. I can show you personally if you like. It was actually this one. Yeah, higher GDP and renewable energy use. And then this was the second slide. So I think there are a lot of things here we could change. This was another great project. The reason I'm highlighting it is because I thought it was great work from last semester. But I would keep this way simpler. How many of you like figures like this in a presentation? How many of you don't? Okay, so maybe mixed on that. I think I wouldn't include this. And then with this second slide, you could make it clearer, I think, by instead of giving the regression output like this, you could just say it in a sentence. Olga's example is amazing. This, I want to see this in everyone's presentation. Give me a sentence like this. Okay, maybe we'll leave this here. All right, so we have one more class, and then we have the final projects. I want to talk to as many of you as possible if I haven't talked to you already. I've talked to a lot of you already, but there are a few that I would love to talk to. We have maybe 25 minutes until the end of class, so let's take up that whole time. And I also have office hours almost directly after. I need to go grab some food, but then I'm going to my office, and I'd love to see anyone there. Otherwise, feel free to stick around. In fact, I encourage it just to chat with people around you. Maybe run your ideas past a different group. That can be really helpful. And I will see you all on Tuesday, last day of class. So stick around and we can chat.